wish to bring to the public's attention through the media, after which we will entertain questions on his opening statement, and if time permits, we will allow other questions of a topical nature. I'll hand you over to Dr. Roger Luncheon.
Thank you, Kwame, and good morning again, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Cabinet met on the 19th, and arising from that Cabinet meeting, these are the matters I'll be bringing to your attention. Parliament, Budget 2013, broadcast licensing, and then Cabinet snippets. It goes without saying, the Cabinet did not have contracts to consider at the most recent sitting. I would volunteer from now that we do have time after my opening statement to deal with topical matters as advised by Kwame. Let's start with Parliament. The Cabinet contends that the opposition in Parliament must be made to rue the day, March the 14th, 2013, that they took their parliamentary dysfunctions to the height of unacceptability. I refer here specifically to their rejection of the firearm bill. Their rejection of that bill, Cabinet further contends, must be thrown in their collective faces at every possible opportunity. This is nationally, regionally, and internationally. The poverty of their position is revealed by the contemporary talk now of their intention to resubmit the very same bill that they rejected, whose enactment they rejected, as an opposition bill. This latest and the most incomprehensible of their parliamentary excesses has grave implications for the nation and for the future. Specifically, gun crimes and Guyana's commitment to gun control and gun control efforts, domestically and internationally. And then generally, the opposition political parties and their accountability to their supporters and, of course, to the nation. The question must be asked, will this practice by the parliamentary opposition be resorted to again and again in the Parliament and in the future? And perhaps more fundamentally, when will their madness be stopped? Budget 2013. The Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, has announced March 25th as Budget Day. Even as late as this current week, the media continues to be bombarded with disclosures and releases about the process of budget formulation. Here I refer specifically contributions made by engagements with stakeholders, target groups. The fact that consultations were promised is indisputable. The fact that the promised consultations were held is equally indisputable. The reported tenor of those engagements with target groups and stakeholders reflected the seriousness that the participants brought to the process of consultations. Flowing from those beginnings, there can only be a better understanding. Minister Singh's remarks, there can only be a better understanding of the interests, the mutual interests of the various stakeholders, private sectors, organized labor, and the Guyanese public, taxpayers at large. For this 2013 parliamentary consideration, both the debate and then the appropriation bill, Cabinet expects a constructive engagement. Cabinet expects a constructive engagement, one that is appropriate for the seriousness that surrounds parliamentary consideration of a national budget, and specifically in the case of Guyana, our national budget. Broadcast licensing. Cabinet contends that the representations in the hostile media on licensing in the broadcast sector continues to be highly inflammatory and misinforming. Highly inflammatory and misinforming. Recent radio broadcast licensing has been recklessly portrayed in the hostile media. For one, the PPC government under former President Bharat Jagdeo committed to and did end the state radio broadcast monopoly. That to us and the enlightened Guyanese is the most incisive of events surrounding this entire matter, the end of the radio broadcast monopoly, the state radio broadcast monopoly. Cabinet feels that this aspect is rather inadequately, if at all, addressed in the representations made in the media. Secondly, the old Post and Telegraph Act was replaced by the recently enacted Broadcast Act 2011. The provisions in that act were not dreamt up. Those provisions arose largely from the work of the task force established by former President Jagdeo and former leader of the opposition. The new radio broadcast field is already well populated, and the legislation recently enacted allows now for furthering of that process. These to us in the PPP civic administration are the more salient features of this entire episode. Now we come to the nexus of spectrum frequency allocation and broadcast licensing. Cabinet feels that inadequate attention purposefully was paid to the distinction between licensing and frequency allocation. In essence, a broadcaster who is properly licensed has options depending on the scale of their intended enterprise. They have options depending on what is available through the design of spectrum allocation that is current. Adam Harris, a broadcaster, may elect or may be constrained to broadcast in a specific geographic location. In other words, he may very well be like the University of Guyana, like the Matakai NDC, and be a community-based broadcaster, provided with a single spectrum allocation, a frequency that would allow them to broadcast in that area. Luncheon, the broadcaster, may have greater designs and may have ambitions beyond a specific geographic location, might want to broadcast or heard his signals in Bobis, in Essequibo, in Region 10. No one frequency would permit for such. Luncheon has the option of getting 3 broadcast licenses in the 3 separate locations, or to be provided with frequencies so his one broadcast from Georgetown can indeed, through the appropriate technology, be transmitted into Linden, into Borbis, and Essequibo simultaneously. That distinction, Cabinet feels, was not, and we say purposefully, not properly made, leading the uninitiated to feel that there was some identity between a frequency allocation and a broadcast license. The frequency allocation that's been provided to a broadcaster allows specifically for their broadcast to be transmitted in a geographic area. Maybe if we had some annotation for the frequency allocation, so when you see channel 26, you would know that this is a Borbis 26 and not a Georgetown 26 or not a Essequibo 26. Some of this confusion that evolved might have been lessened, and the misrepresentations of what the Prime Minister attempted to provide in the Parliament to the question by MP Hughes, those misrepresentations would have not occurred. As I said, geographic considerations influence frequency allocation, and we are contending that that was deliberately downplayed and confusingly portrayed in the hostile press. For now, under the extant legislation, the Broadcasting Act, and the Broadcasting Authority with its governing board licensing both radio and television is in process. Note should be taken that the decision that was made in 2011 to end the radio monopoly exclusively dealt with radio broadcast licensing. I can assert that TV broadcast license were not issued in 2011 because there was no question of a state TV broadcast monopoly. The interventions made in 2011 was to fulfill a commitment that the PPP Civic administration made to end state monopoly in radio. As a consequence, TV broadcast license were not issued in 2011. LCDS, Amerindian Development Fund, the launch of the fund. Friday, March the 22nd, the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, in conjunction with the partner entity UNDP, will launch our GRIF fund, LCDS, Amerindian Development Fund, and that is designated to support Amerindian village economies. The launch would be at Princess International Hotel, and President Ramatar would address the gathering. This launching of the first phase would see a sample of the close to 200 Amerindian communities that are intended to benefit from the GRIF funding to implement their community development plans. It would see a sample, I think the number is about 27 of them, having their community development plan implemented. The occasion would be used by the organizers to bring together stakeholders, the special interest groups, and definitely those who are involved with GRIF implementation, to fashion and to monitor the implementation of this phase one so that lessons could be learned and applied for other GRIF projects and specifically for the rollout to the other over 150 Amerindian communities whose community development plans are to be funded through the GRIF. President Michel Martelly's visit to Guyana, the Haitian president is here, visiting Guyana for the first time. CARICOM's intercession was recently held in Haiti. As you recall, President Ramatar attended the intercession in Haiti. This is not really a reciprocal visit but President Martelli would be using this occasion to meet with CARICOM, the Secretary General, and the CARICOM Secretariat. Of importance is a 1 p.m. engagement today between the President of Haiti, President Martelli, and his delegation, and with cabinet members here in the office of the President. And then for a spot of recreation and leisure, a dinner hosted by President Ramotara at State House tonight in honor of the visit of President Martelli. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, those are the questions, those are the matters I wanted to bring to your attention. As I said, time is available for us to entertain questions both on my opening statement and those that you consider of topical interest. Thank you.
Yes, first.
Radio. You said inadequate attention was paid and you criticized what was presented in the media. But sir, how do you respond to what appeared to be the selective granting of these radio licenses? One was granted to the political party as opposed to any other political party. Another one, well, Channel 28 was granted one because it had, the court had ruled that it was entitled to a radio license. And then another one was granted to a relatively new company, I think its name is Elcor, to the exclusion of all the others that had application in the system. How would you justify the selection of those recipients?
I will start by pointing out to you that the exercise of discretion reposes in the provision, the Post and Telecommunication Act. I don't believe even a cursory examination would allow you to feel that there is any obligation on the powers that be, as established in the Act, to apply a discretion to ensure that 64 applicants or 20 applicants are indeed licensed because they have applied. There will have to be an exercise of discretion by the powers that be. The reason I drew your attention to the Broadcast Act and its provisions is the difference between the Post and Telegraph Act and the Broadcast Act. There are specific provisions that are embodied that pronounce and influence the exercise of discretion. It isn't there in the Post and Telegraph Act. And I go back to what I claim was our most incisive intervention. We were interested in living up to the commitment to remove the monopoly. I don't believe that we were interested in removing the monopoly to the satisfaction of the hostile media or to the satisfaction of the applicants. For us, at the end of the day, NCN that enjoyed a state radio monopoly, after the intervention of the President, the Minister of Information and Communication, it no longer did. And that's all I want to say on that matter. I don't believe that one by one can be asked, nor do I intend to respond to why Joe Blow, why John Singh, why Mary Jane. I'll tell you why all of them. Because their licensing essentially responded, it accorded to a commitment we made to remove the state monopoly in radio. And my feeling is that we weren't obsessed adequately with that development. And therefore we gone chasing why Bobby Ramroob get one and he get 5 this. That's not the issue. The National Broadcast Authority tomorrow, next week, next month, 5 years from now, will make this what we're discussing now immaterial, because they're going to continue licensing applicants for radio license even after me and you dead and gone, Adam. And the question will become, there was a time when we did quarreling who get and who didn't get. And that's the reality. I think we at the cabinet rightfully feel that this matter wasn't played up in a very enlightened way. Scores continue having to be settled, and that unfortunately prevented and obscured a good, healthy discussion about the broadcast sector and the future in Guyana.
And the charges of discrimination were just what they were, charges of discrimination?
Yes, it's just like any other person who made the contentions. Extremely difficult to prove, extremely difficult to establish. I'll say this, what is in the provisions in the new Broadcast Act that imposes on the authority in its application of due process, studying and doing the licensing, it's all spelled out. And as I pointed out, those provisions have been highly influenced by the proceedings of that task force that was established in 2000, 2001 to study radio broadcasting and the media.
Next question. Any other questions? Sorry? I didn't have your question. Okay. Any other question outside the opening statement? Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Sergeant's not one, but I know Ashley is going to pronounce on some NIS measures. Of course she does. Could you imagine NIS, careful that you, NIS not being a matter of interest to the Guyanese people?
That is true. Because we still got some parts to be documented, and still there's some people that establish the stream can't collect the benefits and all of that.
Don't say they can't. Say up to now they have not.
Some of them might get into the damn thing.
They got an estate, man. You're
You
discounting the
ever see a
estate.
bring struggle to a cemetery? I can't get the estate, boy, want me money, me left nothing behind them.
Yeah, I have been lamenting this anyway, there's another story.
Yeah.
It's another story. I don't believe that is one we could be proud of. And definitely after 1994 to now, that would be 18 years, 19 years.
Yeah, just about.
I don't believe I could shirk responsibility for quite a bit of what is. But I suppose the whole thing about life is once you admit your failings and you're doing something
That is why it's always